Welcome to Moments in History channel. Today, we're sailing back in time to an era of longships, legendary warriors, and epic voyages. We're diving deep into the world of the Vikings, a people who reshaped the course of history. But who were they really? Were they just the brutal raiders of popular legend, or was there more to their story? Let's find out. Our story begins in Scandinavia, the lands we now know as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. For centuries, these northern peoples lived relatively isolated lives, farming, fishing, and perfecting their craft. But by the late 8th century, something changed. In combination of factors, overpopulation, a thirst for wealth, and political ambition, pushed them out onto the open seas. And they didn't just have the will, they had the way. They had the longship. This vessel was a masterpiece of naval engineering. Sleek, fast, and with a shallow draft it could navigate both stormy oceans and shallow rivers, allowing the Vikings to strike deep into the heart of Europe with astonishing speed and surprise. The year is 793. On the quiet, holy island of Lindisfarne, off the coast of northeastern England, monks are going about their daily prayers. Suddenly, from the mists, longships appear on the horizon. The raid that followed was swift, brutal, and utterly shocking to the Christian world. Monasteries, which were often wealthy and poorly defended, became prime targets. This event is often cited as the dramatic opening act of the Viking Age. It sent a wave of terror across Europe and announced the arrival of a formidable new power. For the next 3 centuries, the sight of a dragon-headed prow would strike fear into coastal communities from Ireland to Italy. But to label the Vikings merely as pirates and raiders is to miss a huge part of their story. They were, in fact, brilliant opportunists. Raiding was just one aspect of their activities. They were also savvy traders, skilled artisans, and ambitious settlers. They didn't just take, they also created, traded, and built. Their trade networks were vast and sophisticated, connecting worlds that had rarely interacted. Norse merchants traveled down the great rivers of Eastern Europe, the Volga and the Dnieper, carrying goods like furs, amber, and walrus ivory. They traded with the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople and the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. In fact, thousands of Arabic coins have been discovered in Viking hordes across Scandinavia, a testament to this incredible global reach. They weren't just on the edge of the world, they were at its very center, a vital link in a chain of commerce that stretched from the Arctic to the Middle East. While some Vikings sought wealth through trade, others sought land. The pressure of growing populations at home led many to look for new places to settle. They established colonies across the North Atlantic, pushing the boundaries of the known world. They settled in the Faroe Islands and the Scottish Isles. In Iceland, they created a new society, founding one of the world's oldest parliamentary bodies, the Althing, in 930. From Iceland, the legendary explorer Eric the Red, exiled for manslaughter, sailed west and founded a settlement in a vast, icy land he cunningly named Greenland to attract more settlers. But the Viking voyages didn't stop there. The most incredible chapter of their exploration was yet to come. Around the year 1000, Eric the Red's own son, Leif Erikson, guided by tales of a land sighted even further west, set sail from Greenland. He and his crew landed in North America, a place they called Vinland, meaning wineland, likely because of the wild grapes they found there. They built a small settlement at a site we now know as L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. Think about that for a moment. Vikings were living in North America nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus even set sail. While their settlement didn't last long, due to conflicts with the native inhabitants and the sheer distance from home, it remains one of the most astonishing achievements in the history of exploration. Back in Europe, the Viking impact was equally profound, but in a very different way. They weren't just raiding and leaving, they were conquering and staying. In England, decades of raids culminated in the arrival of the Great Heathen Army in 865. This wasn't a small raiding party. It was a massive force intent on conquest. They systematically overran several Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, eventually establishing a vast territory in northern and eastern England known as the Danelaw. Here Norse laws, customs, and language took root, blending with the local Anglo-Saxon culture. Words we use in English today like sky, skin, leg, and even Thursday, Thor's Day, are all legacies of this Viking presence. In France, the constant threat of Viking raids led the French king, Charles the Simple, to make a deal in 911. He granted a powerful Viking leader named Rollo a large territory in exchange for his loyalty and his promise to defend the coast against other raiders. This region became known as Normandy, the land of the Northmen, and these newly settled Vikings, the Normans, would themselves go on to become one of the most formidable military and political forces in European history, most famously conquering England in 1066. Meanwhile, in the east, Swedish Vikings, known as the Rus, were traveling down the rivers toward the Black and Caspian Seas. They started as traders and mercenaries, but soon became rulers. A figure named Rurik is said to have established control in Novgorod around 862, laying the foundations for a dynasty that would rule the region for centuries. His successors moved their capital to Kyiv, creating the powerful state of Kievan Rus, the cultural and political ancestor of modern-day Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. So, the very origins of these nations are deeply intertwined with the story of these Scandinavian adventurers. The Viking Age wasn't just about warriors and explorers. It was also defined by a rich and complex culture. Their society was organized around chieftains and powerful families, bound by oaths of loyalty. They had a sophisticated legal system, and disputes were often settled at local assemblies called things. Their religion was a polytheistic faith, populated by a pantheon of famous gods like Odin, the All-Father, Thor, the mighty god of thunder, and Loki, the cunning trickster. These weren't just myths. They were a core part of their worldview, explaining creation, destiny, and the nature of the cosmos. Their stories, passed down orally for generations before being written down in the sagas, tell epic tales of heroes, battles, and voyages, giving us a priceless window into their values of courage, honor, and a certain fatalism in the face of destiny. So, what brought this incredible era to an end? There wasn't a single event, but rather a slow transformation. By the 11th century, the political landscape of Europe had changed. Kingdoms had become more centralized and better at defending themselves. The old Viking tactic of swift, surprising raids was no longer as effective. At the same time, Scandinavia itself was changing. The scattered chiefdoms were consolidating into the unified Christian kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. As Christianity spread, it brought with it different values and a closer integration with the rest of Christian Europe. The Old Norse religion faded, and with it, some of the cultural drivers of the Viking way of life. The year 1066 is often seen as a symbolic endpoint for the Viking Age. In that single year, a major Viking invasion of England led by the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada was defeated at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Just a few weeks later, the English king who defeated him was himself defeated and killed at the Battle of Hastings by William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, a direct descendant of the Viking chief Rollo. In a way, the Viking Age ended as it began, with Scandinavian warriors fighting for a crown on English soil. But this time, the victor was a Christianized French-speaking duke whose ancestors had been Vikings a century and a half before. The transformation was complete. Though the Viking Age ended, the legacy of the Vikings is all around us. It lives on in our language, in place names across Northern Europe, and in the DNA of millions of people. It lives on in their incredible stories, which continue to inspire books, movies, and television shows. They were more than just raiders. They were explorers who charted unknown seas, merchants who connected distant cultures, poets who told epic tales, and settlers who built new worlds. They were a dynamic and transformative force that left an indelible mark on history. The story of the Vikings is a powerful reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, and that even the most feared warriors can also be creators, innovators, and pioneers. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the age of the Vikings. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to Moments in History channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments which part of the Viking story fascinates you the most. Until next time, stay curious.